Are you sick of following a diet that only works for a few weeks before ending up in a weight loss stall? The good news is you found this video and we are going to talk about the magical world of tracking macros. Okay, so it's not really that magical, but macro tracking is the tool you need to make sure that you never end up in a weight loss plateau again. Hey, I'm Nissa. I don't know. And now that I've lost 100 pounds, I want to show you how I lost it and more importantly, how I keep it off. So what are macros? In case you're new to counting macros for weight loss, let's talk about this magical weight loss tool. The term macros is short for macronutrients. When most people talk about tracking macros for weight loss, they're tracking carbohydrates, protein, and fats, which are the main nutrients in food that give you energy. Whether you follow a flexible dieting lifestyle or even more trendy plans like keto, macro tracking yields far better results than winging weight loss with intuitive eating or only counting calories, since you have actual numbers that you can analyze to help you reach your goal. And while the ultimate goal is to work towards a more intuitive style of eating, when it comes to learning the weight loss ropes, tracking macros for weight loss is your best bet. And the good news is, once you learn the right macros, this takes all of the guesswork out of weight loss. So long, fad diets, I never liked you anyway. If you're a veteran of dieting like me, maybe you're wondering why not just track calories? After all, weight loss is all about calories in versus calories out, right? Well, kind of. While it's true that you do need to be in a calorie deficit for weight loss, how you distribute those is way more important than most beginners think. And that's mostly because while a calorie is a calorie in the sense that all calories are defined as a unit of energy, not all calories make you feel the same. And that's because your body responds to and uses different calories in different ways. Like if you were to eat a diet entirely made up of carbs, you would have a ton of blood sugar spikes and crashes throughout the day, which would leave you feeling hungry and tired. You would also become frail and weak since protein is the main building block of muscle, which you kind of need to do things like get off the toilet. If you were to eat a diet entirely made up of protein, you would look like Arnold. Just kidding. Kind of. But your hair could fall out or you might feel depressed since eating enough fat is important for hormonal health. And also you might lack energy or stress your body when you cut out too many carbs. So yes, calorie counting for weight loss is a great start, but an effective weight loss strategy really comes down to how you break down the percentages of calories that you eat into carbs, fats, and protein. And figuring out the right breakdown for your specific goals is what will determine your long-term weight loss results. So now that we understand macros, let's talk about how to track macros for a successful weight loss plan. But first, before you can track, you have to understand how to calculate macros for weight loss. If you're doing like 3 other things right now, I need you to pay attention to what I'm about to say because it is important. You need to calculate your macros specific to you since what works for me isn't going to work for you. And sometimes even what worked for you won't work for you. Like if you've gained or lost a lot of weight since your last macro calculation, your macros won't work. Even if you dropped 100 pounds and then regained 50 back, your past macros will not work. All of this to say is don't look at some random person on the internet who has the body that you want and then follow her macros. And if you've fallen off of a weight loss plan that was working, it doesn't always work if you just plug in the same macros that worked before. Take time to learn this skill and then put it to good use anytime your diet needs a little kick in the keister. Wait, did I just say kick in the keister? When calculating your starting macros, there's a few ways you can do this. The easiest way is to find an online macro calculator and enter your stats. My current favorite online calculator is from prophysique.com. And the reason that I like this calculator is it really hones in on the calories out portion of the equation by dialing in on what your actual daily movement is. Before I began using calculators like this, I always assumed that I should use moderately to very active for calculations because I'm at the gym most days. But it wasn't until I found this calculator that I realized that I actually get very little activity outside of the gym since I don't have a job that keeps me on my feet. So with this calculator, I'm able to choose the sedentary option while also adding in my specific exercise routine. With that said, I typically only use this calculator to get my fat loss goal's calorie number. While you can scroll down and get all of your macros, I find this calculator to be just a little confusing, especially for beginners. So if you feel like you want to fill in the rest of the numbers and just be done, you can do that. But I also want to show you how I calculate macros manually for anyone who gets confused by calculators like these. Now that I have my fat loss calories, which is somewhere around 2,000 calories per day, let's figure out how much protein I should eat if my goal is weight loss. A good number to shoot for is somewhere between 25 to 35% of your total calories coming from protein. Since I sometimes struggle with hunger, and I know my body already digests protein well, I am going to go on the higher end and pick a range somewhere between 30 to 35%. 30% of 2,000 calories is 600, and since there are 4 calories in each gram of protein, I'm going to divide that number by 4. 600 divided by 4 equals 150 grams of protein per day. 35% of 2,000 calories is 700. 700 divided by 4 equals 175 grams of protein per day. So for maximum satiety and muscle gain, or at least muscle retention, I want to aim to eat between 150 to 175 grams of protein per day. And a good way to check that this number is where you want it to be is to eat at least your target goal weight in grams of protein each day. Since my target goal weight is somewhere in the 150s, I know that I'm on the right track with this protein range. Now, does that mean that I have to hit this number perfectly or else I'll never lose weight? Of course not. Just do the best that you can starting out and aim to get better every day until you're eating in that range consistently. If all you want to do is calculate your target calories and protein range, you can make a lot of progress just tracking these two things. In fact, these are really the only two variables that I focus on nutrition-wise in order to reach my goals. I will add one minor caveat here. You do want your fat macros to be at least 25% of your total calories in order to keep your hormones happy. Since I'm coming from following a keto diet for nearly a decade, getting enough fat isn't a struggle for me. But if you're someone who always has eaten a carb-heavy diet, then you should track to make sure that you're getting a minimum of 25% of your calories from healthy fats. So the way to figure out 25% of total calories from fat is to go back to that original calorie deficit number, for me was 2,000, and multiply it by 25%, and that gives us 500. Since there are 9 calories in each gram of fat, divide 500 by 9. That comes to 55. So to get at least 25% of calories from fat, I have to eat a minimum of 55 grams of fat per day. And if you're coming from keto, that is really nothing. So it's not something that you'll have to be all that concerned with. Since you're following a flexible diet, you can raise that number up depending on how you feel and how you're using the energy. Let's take my plan as an example. Most of the days, I end up somewhere around 40% of my calories from fat. So with 30% coming from protein and 40% from fat, that leaves somewhere around 30% of my energy coming from carbs. And that plan works for me because the fat helps keep me satiated, but the carbs help fuel my workouts, and they also help me sleep better when I save some for closer to bedtime. And this is the balance that works for me. But a 30-30-40 split might not be the right split for you. So this is just something that you're going to have to play with and figure out what is right for you. But you don't have to get too hung up on carbs versus fats. As long as you're hitting at least your minimum protein macros and staying at or under your calorie target, you are going to see a lot of good progress. You can let the carbs and fat fall into place to fit whatever your preference is. And always keep in mind, the best fat loss macros are the macros that will work for you. So for some people, that might be higher carbs, while others might be more consistent with a higher fat plan. Now that you understand how to figure out how much protein to eat and how to calculate your minimum fat threshold, let's just do a quick carb calculation in order to balance this video out. And even though you don't need to worry about carbs versus fats, you should still understand the math, especially if you are a type A like me. So you want to figure out carbs the same as you do with protein. Let's say you want to eat 30% of carbs. Just take your deficit number of 2,000 calories and multiply it by 30%. Then divide by 4 since there are 4 calories in a gram of carbohydrate. And that brings you to 150 grams of carbs per day. Okay, so you calculated 2,000 calories with a minimum of 150 grams of protein, somewhere around 150 grams of carbs, and a minimum of 55 grams of fat. But since you want to eat enough calories, if you only eat 30% from carbs, that really means that you'll be eating closer to 89 grams of fat. Okay, cool. Now you 100% understand how to calculate macros. Or maybe you'll need to watch that section over again and take some notes. But either way, calculating macros isn't enough to reach your weight loss goals. Now you have to put in the hard work and actually track macros. First off, it's not that hard. And really, it's not that much work. Once you get it down, tracking only takes a few minutes per day. And the benefits you get, like actually understanding why your weight loss plan isn't working when you do hit a weight loss plateau, it is life-changing. You will need 2 things to track macros for weight loss. The first thing is a food scale, and the second is a macro tracking app. A lot of people like an app called MyFitnessPal, but I prefer Cronometer. And that's mostly because I've been using it for more than 5 years and I have a ton of data that I can look back on. When it comes to how to use a food scale, the process is pretty straightforward. Add a plate to the top of the scale and zero it out. Add your food and decide if you want to weigh your food in ounces or grams. Either one works since most food apps will let you switch back and forth. I typically measure things like meats, cheeses, and snacks in ounces just because that's what I'm used to. But when it comes to recipes, I try to remember to measure those in grams since whenever you add a recipe into your app, that's how the app calculates your recipe. But even if you forget to measure your recipe out in grams and measure in ounces out of habit, you can search for an ounces to grams calculator online and just figure it out after the fact. When it comes to how to weigh food, you'll want to weigh it right before you eat it or once it's been cooked. So something like chicken. If you start with a raw 8-ounce chicken breast, that will most likely cook down to 6 ounces once it's cooked. And while it might not make a huge difference when it comes to macros for something like chicken, small errors like that can add up to a plan where you're either overeating or undereating and not hitting close enough to your macro targets. But please do not feel like you always have to be 100% when it comes to tracking foods either. The best way to get results with macro tracking is by being consistent, not perfect. While it's true the closer you get, the better results you get, it's also true that you'll get better results from taking your best guess than not tracking at all. Now, if you're wondering how long do you have to track macros for weight loss, that depends. Some people only want to track at the start of their plan just to get a better idea of where they need to be, and then they phase macro counting out for more of an intuitive eating type plan. Macro tracking is so simple and takes such little time that I like having the numbers and knowing exactly where I'm at when it comes to reaching my goal. For now, I see myself tracking macros well into my weight maintenance phase, just so I know that my habits are solid and that I'm not at risk of falling back into old habits that lead to weight regain. And since maintaining what you lose is like 1,000 times harder than actually losing weight, I suggest most of my clients follow the same long-term macro tracking approach. Perhaps you won't have to be as strict on the weekends or holidays once you hit your goal, but tracking is a great long-term weight loss and weight maintenance strategy. Okay, so we covered what macros are, why counting macros is better than just counting calories, an easy way to calculate macros, and how to add macro tracking into your daily routine. So what's next? Well, you can check out this video to learn how following the same flexible dieting approach I've used to drop 40 pounds, yes, even after 40, can help you change your life too.